Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's webinar, The Heart of Self-Acceptance. My name is Zoe Kessler and I'll be your host this evening on behalf of PsychCentral.com. Tonight's special one-hour event, The Heart of Self-Acceptance, features PsychCentral.com's special guests Mike Bondurant, Noah Rubinstein, and Francine Shapiro. Our speakers will talk about something that I know a lot of us have grappled with at some point in our lives: how to gain greater self-acceptance. They'll also consider some of the fundamental obstacles that get in our way along the path to self-acceptance and leave us with some specific ideas that we can act upon after the webinar. Now, before we introduce tonight's first presenter, I'd like to remind you that you will be able to access the complete webinar online at Psych Central's YouTube channel later this week. Tonight's session will consist of 3 presentations followed by a question and answer period. During the Q&A, please type your questions in the question panel. Now, you can direct your question to a specific presenter or presenters, or ask the question without directing it to anyone in particular. We'll try to answer everyone's questions, but we'll also do our very best to wrap up the session within an hour. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce tonight's first presenter, Mike Bondurant. Mike is a retired mental health counselor, a Psych Central blogger, and co-founder of the INLP Center, which offers online NLP training and personal development programs. Mike also hosts the popular natural news radio program, Mental Health Exposed. He writes educational articles and interviews top authors and thought leaders in the field of mental health in an effort to spread integrative knowledge. So let's turn the reins over to Mike. So we just have a little housekeeping to do here to get that to happen. And welcome, Mike. Are you still there, Mike?
I am here. Thank you,
Zoe.
Good.
Oh, good.
So I just need to, get this to a place where people can see the right thing. Okay, here we are. We still see maybe a little bit of the GoToMeeting panel. I'll try to drag that down. But listen, it's my pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be in your company, Zoe, and as well as Francine and Noah. These are real thought leaders in our field, and it's just a pleasure for me to make my presentation. And I've chosen to present on self-acceptance versus self-sabotage. So for me, it seems like self-acceptance should be the most natural thing in the world, but so many of us have little idea what it's like. So let's imagine for a moment what it would be like to live in a self-accepting state. For me, what that would be like is when you're happy, you're happy. You don't consider it selfish. Tell yourself it will never last. You don't hide your happiness. You don't make choices that destroy it. When you're hurt, you're hurt. You don't punish yourself, feel ashamed for being hurt. You don't react in a vengeful way that's likely to create more hurt. When you're afraid, you're afraid. You don't shame yourself for being afraid, tell yourself that you're broken, or avoid doing what you could do to restore your confidence. And when you're discouraged, you're discouraged. You don't call yourself a loser, tell yourself things will never change. You don't remain passive and feel like a victim. So a self-accepting attitude focuses or faces the joys and sorrows of life while avoiding self-sabotage. So if you were purely self-accepting, life would be a little simpler. You wouldn't take painful experiences and make them worse, and you wouldn't take pleasant experiences and dismiss them. So when you aren't self-accepting, however, you can take whatever you're experiencing and turn it into something that is painful and unacceptable. And this is self-sabotage. It happens when we're subconsciously drawn toward negativity and pain. In other words, we become our own worst enemies. And in such a state, self-acceptance is impossible. Now, there's a couple of qualities that self-sabotage has that make it particularly difficult to deal with. One, it seems to happen on autopilot, out of conscious awareness, and therefore outside of control. And two, it's strangely magnetic. In other words, we tend to set ourselves up to feel bad in many cases, as if we were oddly attracted to it. In fact, we often resist obvious solutions when struggling with self-sabotage. So let's talk about this a little further. What are the roots of self-sabotage? I'm going to suggest that we were set up for self-sabotage long before our conscious mind developed. Negative feelings begin at an early age, and the unfortunate truth is it doesn't take much to launch a cascade of negativity into a child's life. Probably began before you can remember, before you were conscious of yourself. So here are some examples of how easy it can be to create pain and angst early in life. For a baby to feel controlled, all you need to do is keep him from going wherever he wants. For a baby to feel deprived, all you need to do is delay feeding for a few moments. For a baby to feel rejected, all you need to do is look the other way. Why is this? Babies and young children have little sense of time and no realization that others are separate people with their own needs and limitations. In other words, they want what they want immediately with no filters, no means of delaying gratification. They even desire what may harm them with no ability to understand that they shouldn't have it. So, in a way, babies and young children seem to be set up to struggle. As babies bump into boundaries and limitations, they tend to feel repeatedly controlled, deprived, and rejected, even by the best of parents. Now, thoughtless parents make matters much worse, as you know, and there are so many thoughtless parents who pile on to our struggle by criticizing us for not getting it or not cooperating. They say things like, how come you're so stupid? Whose kid are you anyways? Can't you do anything right? And why are you such pain? And so the people whose job it is to nurture you through the process of growing up and discovering your limitations are now inflicting personal negativity. And of course, this is not to mention what happens in the cases of more severe trauma and abuse. And what's worse is there's no physical escape for the child, none whatsoever. Child is physically stuck in that situation. There is, however, a psychological escape that seems to be irresistible. And the psychological escape seems crazy on the surface, but it does explain the self-perpetuating and magnetic qualities of self-sabotage. When there's no physical escape from pain, you only have one choice, and that's to tolerate it. When you tolerate something long enough, it becomes familiar, sort of like a part of who you are. And of course, what's familiar is safe, and some even say pleasurable. Certainly when you think of the two categories of pleasure and pain, familiarity would be in the pleasure category. And so this is how self-sabotage and emotional pain become perpetual and magnetic. They get defined or programmed into us as safe and familiar. And so we're naturally drawn to what's safe and familiar, even though we may not like it in this case, yet we're still driven toward it. This is what makes people say things like, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to anyway. I don't know who I would be without my problems. Happiness is for other people, not me. We become attached, consciously or subconsciously, to our negatively magnetized situation in life. So you're probably thinking right now, oh, okay, fine, but how do I get out of this? How do I stop sabotaging myself and start accepting myself? And to me, this is the exciting part because it's not as complicated as it might seem. The primary tool is expanded self-awareness. At the INLP Center, we've developed a program called the AHA Solution to end self-sabotage, and within that program is a process called the AHA process, and I'd like to share that process with you now in the following example, which is a common life example. Let's say that you're faced with a choice to purchase a sensible, affordable car or a fancier car that is beyond your particular budget. You can't afford, in this case, the fancy car. Self-sabotaging tendencies will tempt you to make a poor choice that you ultimately cannot be at peace with. You're enchanted by the sleek body, the rich leather, the powerful engine, and pride of ownership that comes with the high-priced vehicle. And so a self-sabotaging tendency would be to generate excuses. You tell yourself you'll be making more money soon, and so you'll be able to pay for it. In fact, you'll be more motivated now. Or you can't say no to this nice salesperson who's worked so hard to get a commission. Or people will respect you more if you have a nice car. In fact, you may even feel like a loser if you don't get this car, and that's how far removed from reality you might become under the influence of self-sabotage. Better judgment would tell you that you simply can't afford it. You don't have the money. You know it's a poor choice, but better judgment isn't working here. A self-sabotaging tendency is working here. So you purchase the fancy car. Soon enough, however, you realize that you've taken on more than you can handle financially. Now, you might blame the high-pressure salesperson or even a materialistic culture for your feelings of guilt, shame, frustration, or helplessness. You could even blame yourself and really get down on yourself and pile on for making an irrational decision. You might then look back on a string of bad decisions and chastise yourself for never getting your life together, for being a loser in different areas of your life. And again, this is no fun. This is not enjoyable. But it may be familiar territory. It may be just what you know. And you may even find a strange self-justification in your story. Now, let's take your negative car buying experience and turn it into a positive aha solution. In other words, what if you approach this entire process aware of your self-sabotage tendency? And the A in AHA stands for aware. When you understand self-sabotage, you approach, again, this entire car buying process from a different place. From the get-go, you'll be looking for how you might set yourself up to feel bad. You might be honest with yourself about that tendency. So there you are, you're evaluating the car that fits your budget versus the fancier car that you'd really rather have. And you may get a surge of temptation to just close your eyes and sign on the dotted line and drive away in your new fancy car. And again, you may tell yourself you deserve this fancy car, or you've put this off long enough, and so forth. And then, aha, there it is. You suddenly see what's happening. You're being lured into a bad choice that will be very hard to accept once you leave the car lot. You realize that ignoring all the red flags when making decisions is a total setup to feel like a failure. And you may also realize this happens not just with buying cars, but it happens when you make decisions about time and relationships, hobbies, parenting, your health, your career, and in so many areas. So once you're aware of your tendency and you see it right before your eyes, then it's really important to stop. The H in AHA stands for halt. You take a moment to consider what's really going on. Where are you headed? Where is this taking you? You've caught your tendency towards self-sabotage red-handed, trying to lead you into a decision that will taint the pleasure of the fancy car with a healthy dose of pain, shame, self-criticism, feelings of failure, and so forth. And so it's time to get off autopilot. So you stop yourself in your tracks and shake off that trance that suggests that any car really means all that much anyways. And you begin to evaluate this decision in terms of self-sabotage. Is buying the fancy car self-sabotage? Will allow you to feel really good about yourself? Will it enhance your self-respect? When you take everything into consideration, will owning this fancy car and everything goes with it, is it really the right thing to do? And in this moment, you've put yourself in a position of conscious choice. Once you're aware and you stop yourself to reflect on what's going on, the next step, the final A, stands for act. You have to integrate this awareness into your conscious decision-making process. For most people, the conscious desire is to be happy. So good health, financial stability, caring relationships, hobbies, balanced living tend to lead to happiness and self-acceptance. And so the opportunity is here right now to act on new information. Now that you're aware, your choices may look very, very different in light of your new awareness. You could buy the affordable or less expensive car that you can afford. It won't stress you out to own this car. Option 2, you could buy the expensive car that you can't afford. But now, at this point, if you do buy this car, you understand that it's an act of self-sabotage. And option 3, now that you're thinking clearly, who knows what other options will become obvious to you. You may decide not to buy a car. You may commit to saving up for the car that you want. You may even wonder why you wanted to look for a new car in the first place. So with these options and this awareness, this is your chance to get out of your own way. This is your opportunity to act with self-awareness and self-respect. And this, in my view, is the heart of a self-accepting way of being in the world. And Zoe, that is my presentation.
Hurrah! Thank you so much for that, Mike. That's great. Now, I'm going to ask that you switch the reins back to me. And while you're doing that, I'm going to, oh, it looks like Noah is back. Hurrah. Fantastic. So I will, without any further ado, introduce our next presenter, Noah Rubenstein. Noah has an MA in counseling psychology, and he's the founder of goodtherapy.org. And I'm just going to make a little adjustment to the audio. There we go. So back to Noah. Noah's mission is to counter the tendency within the mental health field to view people as deficient and fundamentally flawed. His efforts have been featured extensively in the media, including numerous radio and television interviews and print articles. So let's see if we can get Noah up here to cue the presentation. Noah, are you there? Welcome.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure can. Thanks so much for being here.
All right. Oh, you're welcome, Zoe. Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here and fun to be with all of you. Mike, thank you. You know, I've been house shopping and completely to the self-sabotage you've described. So I've got tons of information here. Can everybody see my screen okay? Zoe, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, I can see it, and what I'm going to do is I'll ask our attendees if they want to raise their hand if they're having trouble seeing the presentation. So, okay. Noah, we'll just assume everything's going smoothly, and we'll let you proceed, and I'll take care of our attendees.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I do have a lot of information, and I'm going to probably talk pretty fast and exclude some of the longer examples that I normally include. I'm essentially compacting hours of information into about 12 minutes here. So the focus of my presentation is on self-compassion, what it is, what it's not, what its benefits are, and how we help people experience it in therapy. So what is self-compassion? To define it, it really helps to talk about what it is and what it's not. Self-compassion is not forcing ourselves to repeat an affirmation or to say kind things to ourselves that we don't feel. In my experience, we just can't force self-compassion. We can't talk ourselves into it. To feel self-compassion, we need to be aware and work with the parts of ourselves which don't always feel self-compassionate, parts that might not like us, parts of ourselves that tend to be self-critical or judgmental or contemptuous or simply filled with shame and worthlessness. We can't ignore these parts. We can't force them away. We can't override them simply by saying nice things to ourselves. But the good thing is that self-compassion arises naturally as a byproduct to tending to self-criticism and judgment and contempt. So self-compassion is not narcissistic self-indulgence. Self-compassion doesn't mean we're flawless. It means we love ourselves in spite of or including all of our limitations. Self-compassion is not static for most people. It's really a process of continually returning back to our center and doing the internal work we need to do in order to have love for ourselves. Self-compassion is different from self-esteem. Whereas self-esteem depends on perceived failure or success, how we feel about what we've accomplished or not accomplished, self-compassion is really independent of achievements. And for many people, self-compassion doesn't come as easily as compassion for others. Oh, well, excuse me. I'm jumping ahead here. And self-compassion is not just a cognitive experience. Depending on how you process information, it can be experienced emotionally, somatically in your body, visually, verbally, but usually results in this warm, lovely, soft internal experience and a deep sense of feeling okay about yourself. It's what Kristen Neff, one of the leading experts on the subject, has identified as kindness, mindfulness, and a sense of shared humanity. So why self-compassion? What are the benefits? For me, at the top of my list, it simply feels better. But there have been hundreds of articles and dissertations which have examined the concept of self-compassion over the last 10 years, and the overall finding is that people with self-compassion are emotionally healthier, experience far less psychopathology, and wrestle with fewer mental health issues. Some of the things the research have found is that people with more self-compassion, as compared to those who have less of it, cope better and have more resiliency to painful emotions and experiences, are more motivated, especially with health-related behaviors such as sticking to diets, exercise, quitting smoking, and are just more motivated and ambitious in general. Those who can be self-compassionate are also far less afraid of failure and are more likely to try again when they don't succeed the first time. When in relationships, people with self-compassion are emotionally connected, accepting of their partners, and also really good for relationships. People with self-compassion acknowledge their own responsibility. Self-compassionate people tend to be happy, optimistic, curious, and emotionally intelligent. One of the things I love about self-compassion is that it leads to authenticity. Self-compassion allows us to love and accept all aspects of ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly, even in the face of external judgment. And this allows us to be ourselves, to be authentic. The other thing about self-compassion that I think is really important is that it's a necessary ingredient for healing and healing many emotional issues. I would venture to say that the catalyst for emotional change is the compassionate relationship we have with ourselves. And what I mean is that the change, the therapy, really is the process of having compassion for ourselves. As Carl Rogers once wrote, the curious paradox is accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So how can therapy help people to access their self-compassion? My knowledge of self-compassion is mostly a result of my own experience in therapy, both as a client and as a therapist. It kind of sounds like the hair club for men a little bit. It's a result of practicing self-compassion. It's a result of reading and training and various models of psychotherapy that view self-compassion as an integral part of therapy, such as internal family systems, mindful self-compassion, and others. What I love about the family systems model and some others is this idea that we're all capable of self-compassion. And the beautiful thing is it's nothing that we need to learn. We just have to get out of our own way. So let me talk about the steps towards self-compassion. And a lot of this I'm adapting and summarizing from the internal family systems model. And I really encourage you, if you want to learn to do what I'm about to share with you, to take a training in IFS, which is the acronym for internal family systems, or see an IFS therapist, or go to any therapist, because I think most therapists sort of do the same process, albeit in a different way. Without training, it's easy to do damage. So that's why I say that. So the first step is a bit of I guess I'd say a philosophical paradigm shift, and I think because this idea conflicts with the idea of original sin, the concept of original sin. So the first step towards self-compassion is realizing that Everyone is doing the best that they can to survive based on their experiences and their physiology. And every part of a person, and by part I mean whether defense mechanisms, issues, states, aspects, whatever we name it. In IFS therapy we use the word part. Every part of a person has a positive intention, even when it's destructive to oneself and others, whether it's depression, addiction, anxiety, anger, self-criticism, or most anything else. Most mental health issues that people bring to therapy are the result of outdated survival strategies, protective parts that are trying to prevent the person from ever being hurt again. So because all of our parts, our issues, defense mechanisms, our strategies are all doing the best they can to help us, it makes them fundamentally good, not fundamentally flawed, even if what they do causes damage. And when we see that goodness, that then it's easy to like a part, and it becomes easier to have compassion. So the second step is about making room for curiosity, what in internal family systems therapy is called differentiating parts from self. So most people come into therapy hating some part of themselves, their anger, their addiction, their anxiety, their depression, their self-doubt, their grief. It doesn't matter. Most people want to get rid of them. So let's say someone comes to therapy wanting to get rid of their social anxiety, their social phobia. You ask them, first thing you ask, well, not the first thing, but when you get into it, you ask them how they feel about it. And they'll likely say they can't stand that part of them. The problem is we can't help the social anxiety until we have compassion for it. So to get the anxiety, we first need to work with the parts that despise the anxiety. So the therapist helps the client to bring that self-critical part closer, that part that despises the anxiety, to bring it closer, to listen to it, to see it, to feel it, to sense it in their body, and to discover why it despises the anxiety. And self-critical parts, even when they're mean, are trying to help us to improve us, to prevent us from feeling judgment, rejection, failure, worthlessness, etc. And once a person gets to know their self-critical part and see how it's been trying to help them, even if the way it's been helping is counterintuitive and hurtful, destructive, the person earns its trust. And the self-critical part can usually relax back with a little reassurance, even if it's temporary. Sometimes self-critical parts have trouble stepping aside and relaxing back, and many people in therapy, before they even begin to work directly on the presenting problem, in this case anxiety, first need to do the deeper work with the self-criticism so that that part doesn't keep stepping in and so it can relax. Somehow, once the self-critical part relaxes back, the therapist can ask the client again how she feels toward it. If she feels curious toward the anxiety, we know she's cleared all the parts that are reacting to it. If she feels anything other than curiosity, it usually means there's another part in the way. The therapist continues working with each part that comes up, reacting to the anxiety, and helping each part one by one to soften and relax back until the client feels curious. Once we have curiosity, then the next step is witnessing. In the same way we feel understood by others, we can feel understood by ourselves. So once a person's shifted into curiosity, they can focus on the part and learn its story. Witnessing that struggle, witnessing the drama, the effort of a part that's worked so hard for so long to protect a person, understanding and seeing its positive intention, seeing how it's tried so hard and suffered, leads naturally to compassion. Self-compassion and empathy are the natural byproducts of witnessing and understanding suffering. So that's a very quick glimpse at how a shift into compassion is not about pushing stuff out of the way, and how it's about bringing our reactions closer, working with them, and shifting effortlessly into compassion. Over time, with this practice, self-compassion here, and the parts that normally with compassion are able to step out of their extreme roles. So I just have about a minute left. How does compassion heal? Oh, look at this. I'm not keeping up on my PowerPoint. Bottom line is self-compassion allows us to treat ourselves in the way we needed to be treated when we were hurt. Most ongoing emotional issues result from not being tended to, cared for, supported, or protected either by ourselves or by others the way we needed to be when we were hurt. And in trauma, our systems were unable to manage the overwhelm. Painful, hurtful, and traumatic experiences form these extreme thoughts, extreme emotions and sensations in our bodies, and self-compassion can help us to undo, untangle unload, unburden, and essentially rewire ourselves. So when a part of us is hurting, it helps to open our hearts to it in the way we do when anyone else is hurting. When a child cries, we don't lock it in a room. When a baby cries, we don't ignore it. Instead, when a baby cries, we go to it. We pick it up. We hold it calmly with love. We find out what it needs to feel better. The same should go for our own pain. Self-compassion is about holding ourselves with love. The parts of us that hold pain generally want to be understood. They want to be felt, witnessed, and cared for. And in the same way a baby calms down when their mother holds them, our pain calms down when it's cared for. The rewiring that happens in therapy, the conditioning, the healing, is the process of simultaneously being with the vulnerable, painful emotions without being overwhelmed by them because of self-compassion. In other words, the transformative part of therapy is really helping people to be present to their pain in a loving and self-compassionate way. And I've got some resources here at this URL, goodtherapy.org, sch.html, books, innovators, articles, and other resources if you're interested. And sorry that was so fast. I'd love to and talk slowly, go more into depth, and have more examples, and I hope it was helpful for you. Thanks again for having me, Zoe.
Thank you so much. I'm just feeling, I'm just relaxing into this webinar. It's lovely. Now, Noah, before we introduce our next presenter, Francine, who I'm sure is on standby right now, I want to share with you that some of the audio is a little bit sort of off and on. So while Francine is giving her presentation, I'm going to ask you if possibly you could check into maybe what might be causing that. I don't know. So
my audio has been off and on.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take back the...
Oh, God, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, it's 98% great. You've got to accept what I'm saying. No worries. You know what? If you were as chill as I am,
about it too.
We're going to all take a deep breath here and launch into our next presenter. No, I'm just going to give you a little peace and quiet here while we present Dr. Shapiro. Francine, I am so thrilled to have you here as well. Our final presenter, Dr. Francine Shapiro, is the originator and developer of E.M.D.R, a recommended treatment for trauma in the practice guidelines of the American Psychiatric Association and in the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. Dr. Shapiro is Executive Director of the E.M.D.R Institute in Watsonville, California, and she's founder and president emeritus of the E.M.D.R Humanitarian Assistance Programs. She's also the author of Getting Past Your Past, Taking Control of Your Life with Self-Help Techniques from E.M.D.R Therapy. I love that title. Francine, welcome. And I guess I better get you back in here. Welcome.
Well, nice to be here. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you. So I am just going to throw the reins over to you for your presentation and onward and upward.
Okay. Well, it's lovely to be here. And I'm also going to be running through this rather quickly. It's a lot of information. But what I'd like to be able to get across to folks, and there we go, is the concepts that we're dealing with EMDR therapy. As you indicated, it's a scientifically supported form of therapy. It's being used internationally. And what I'd like to show is what the science says, and to give some indication of what might be useful to take a look at. So it's really releasing the neurophysiological and psychological blocks to emotional healing and forgiveness and self-acceptance and happiness and loving relationships and even peaceful communities, because when we come to that level of healthy self-acceptance, of really being able to connect. We find that people even go beyond themselves. They go beyond the nuclear family, and they really take a look at what they can do to help make the planet a better place. So let's just start with a little experiment for everyone. And as I go through these slides, there may be a lot of information on it, but since you can take a look at it at YouTube and stop it, I'm just going to give you the basis of it, the basics of it. So just think for a moment now. I'm going to say a sentence, and just notice the first words that come to mind for you, okay? Roses are red. For most people born in the United States, what comes up next is violets are blue. And it's something that just comes up automatically. But you know, if you take a look at that, that's not true. Violets aren't blue. They're purple. And if you look at the first sentence, which you just accepted, roses aren't always red. They come in yellow and purple and a whole bunch of other colors. But simply because you learned something early on, it's gotten stored in memory networks and it comes up automatically, whether it's true or not. And this is the same thing that rules us when we're unable to feel self-love, when we're not able to accept who we are. We may have automatic feelings of guilt or shame or anxiety, insecurity. These come up automatically because of the way the brain works, because of what's been stored in our memory system. But just because it came up, it doesn't mean it's true. It can be exactly the same as violets are blue when they're not. So what we're going to take a look at is a sense of why we are who we are in the world and what is it that we can do about it. At the very end, there'll be a slide with some resources. I'm going to be going over different research, and there'll be a reference list that you can access at the URL. And also the book can give you more information. So,
Francine,
yeah.
before you go on, it's Zoe just for a moment here. Could you speak a little bit louder, please? We're just having a little bit of trouble hearing you. If you could speak up a little bit, that would be terrific. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So again, what we're taking a look at is how the brain works. And just so that you have an overview, EMDR therapy is considered an A-level treatment for trauma, and it's recommended by organizations like the World Health Organization. There's more than 24 randomized controlled trials that support EMDR therapy with a wide range of populations, and more than 20 additional randomized controlled trials that show the positive effect of the eye movement. The thing to take a look at here is that one of the research, the lines of research, support the notion that what occurs with EMDR is that it links into working memory, and it links into processes that occur during rapid eye movement sleep. And that's really important for all of us because it's during rapid eye movement sleep that the researchers say we process important information that occurred during the day. And if this processing doesn't occur, we actually get stuck with information. We don't learn what's appropriate to learn, and we can keep getting hit by it. The other important thing to know in terms of therapy itself is that many of us come towards the idea of therapy thinking it has to take years and years to accomplish something. But the research on EMDR shows that, for instance, trauma, PTSD from a single trauma can be successfully eliminated within 3 sessions. Having negative beliefs about oneself can be eliminated in the same amount of time, phobias, etc. So what we're really looking at is how do we link in to the brain's own processes and allow them to continue going. The World Health Organization has said that trauma-focused CBT and EMDR are the only psychotherapies recommended for PTSD, and no pharmaceuticals are recommended. that's extremely important because a lot of people will go to a physician or go to a psychiatrist and end up with pharmaceuticals because they're feeling anxiety, they're feeling fear. What they really have are a lot of this are symptoms that can be best dealt with by psychotherapy, and so that's something we need to have in our mind. And EMDR itself is based on the recognition that negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are the result of unprocessed memories. So what do we mean by that? Basically that the brain is set up to make sense of the world. And if something happens in the present, it has to link up with our memory networks in order to be made sense of. So if I had never seen a cup, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But if I have seen a cup, I know that I'm supposed to be drinking from it. Also, it's supposed to be dealing with disturbance. So if I have a fight with someone and I have the negative self-talk and the anxiety and the fear, I go away and I think about it and I talk about it, I dream about it, and the appropriate connections get made, and oh, John, it was a bad day, we've had good times before, and those negative feelings and reactions are able to be resolved. But if the disturbance is too high, it overrides that information processing system of the brain, and the experience becomes stored, unprocessed, with the negative emotions, physical sensations, and beliefs that occurred at the time. And that's what can continue to get us into trouble. And that is really the basis of our lack of acceptance in the world. So when we're looking at a clinical picture in EMDR, we're using something called the adaptive information processing model. And the bottom line is that the past is present, that except in cases of organic problems, genetic issues, toxicity, injury, the stored unprocessed memories are the basis of negative perceptions and responses and attitudes and self-concepts. And these unprocessed memories contain the emotions and the physical sensations and the beliefs that were there at the time. So if something happens in the present, it links up into my memory network, and if I have an unprocessed memory there, then the negative feelings come up. So for every presentation I've made, I ask this question, and with a show of hands, it's usually in excess of 90%. How many of you remember having been humiliated sometime in grade school? And almost everyone had that experience. Well, if you go back and look at that experience, you may find that negative tentacles are wrapped around the present. You got humiliated, and that's given you a problem with public speaking or with authority or talking in crowds or relationships, whatever it might be. So yes, so many things go back to our childhood, and the reason that they do is because we have these unprocessed memories that are really running the show. So whether we're looking at problems like negative beliefs, I am or I did something wrong, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, or I'm in danger, I'm not in control, fear, shame, guilt, all of these issues we can find link back to these earlier experiences and unprocessed memories that are really pushing us because they govern both non-conscious and conscious responses. So if we have a sense of depression and feeling not good enough, what we're looking at is what are these earlier experiences that are running it. And certainly it's not always childhood. It can be experiences as an adult, as an adolescent, post-traumatic stress disorder. Here's a comparison of EMDR therapy to Prozac. And we can see that at follow-up, EMDR is much better because after the treatments are discontinued, the persons can start getting symptomatic again because the reasons for the depressions were not handled. Whereas within EMDR therapy, we identify and process the memories that are the basis of the problems. And the thing in terms of self-compassion is to recognize that according to research, general life events can cause even more PTSD symptoms than major trauma. So you don't have to be a rape victim or a combat veteran to be in pain. And if we can simply remember it, that we are the subject, we're responding to our own memory networks and how they're stored. And we didn't ask, for instance, in childhood. We found that simply being grabbed or shoved can be the basis of a wide range of psychiatric disorders. Being bullied can be the basis of psychotic symptoms. So no matter how we look at the problems we have, if we can simply remember that it's a physical issue, we didn't ask to be treated in that way, and that we can recognize that if it's the physical storage, we can choose to do something about it. There was a Kaiser Permanente study, for instance, that found that exposure to negative events in childhood would have the basis of alcoholism, drug abuse, obesity, depression, and some of the major causes of death. This is not our fault. So our self-acceptance becomes recognizing that we're not bad people because we have negative feelings, because we have negative symptoms, but we can choose to do something about it. So we look at a redefinition of trauma as any of these negative experiences that occurred that can lock in these unprocessed memories and run us. But as the World Health Organization has said, unlike CBT, EMDR doesn't involve detailed descriptions of the event. So rape victims, molestation victims who feel too shamed, please recognize that that's simply part of that unprocessed memory. You don't have to describe the memory in detail in EMDR for it to be changed. Combat veterans who feel guilty about what they did in war, to remember they don't have to describe it in detail. So in therapy, you can be met where you are with compassion, with acceptance, and yes, accepting yourself that you have had things done to you that you didn't ask for and that you can change. Here's an example of an EMDR treatment for complicated grief. Those who feel they can't get past the loss of a loved one very often, and they continue to feel guilty because they keep getting pictures that automatically come up of the person suffering, dying, of what they should have done or could have done. This is the brain locked up. This is the brain holding the unprocessed memory. And what occurs with EMDR is a rapid transformation of this memory as it gets digested and the appropriate linkages are made. And with this, what we find is that at the end of treatment, you have even more positive recall of the deceased because your brain is no longer locked up. The importance of it is, again, to recognize what you're doing is to allowing a therapeutic process that will jumpstart your own natural healing process and allow it to go to an adaptive resolution. So what we do in EMDR therapy is the connection with the therapist is important, the preparation of the client is extremely important, and what we do is identify what are the current problems and use specific techniques which you can find in the book, which brings the awareness of what are the earlier memories that are locking you up? What are the earlier memories that are the basis of the negative thoughts, feelings, and reactions? What are the current situations that trigger it? And what do you need for the future? So that the natural processing can take place when you bring you're prepared so that when you bring these earlier memories to mind and the information processing is stimulated, the appropriate connections are made. So you can take someone who believed that for 20 years that they were covered with unsightly hair and they had to pluck out every hair in front of the mirror before they could leave, And what it traced back to was a negative remark that an aunt made about her underarm hair when she was an adolescent. She had no memory of that incident having occurred, but once it was traced back with the techniques and process, it was gone, again, within the 3 sessions. So to keep in mind that we are simply dealing with locked up information processing, that it can be changed, and it can be changed in a timely fashion. And here are some resources which you can access, and the book will allow you to use the techniques to identify the earlier memories, other techniques to change your reactions, and also guidelines for EMDR therapy to find a good therapist if that's needed. So I hope we've covered everything we need to cover.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Francine. So we're going to switch the screen over to me now. So thank you so much for that presentation. That was just great. Now I will point out we have 7:52 is our time, so we only have 8 minutes, which is a shame. And I'd like to invite those who are attending the webinar tonight to please write in your questions, because unfortunately we will be wrapping up in less than 10 minutes, and we'd like to give you this opportunity to speak with our experts, who obviously we have a wealth of knowledge here. I'm just going to go ahead and change over to my screen here and ask again that that folks send in their questions. And I will make sure that I can get all our presenters talking as well at the same time. Here we go. So Mike, are you there?
I'm here.
Terrific. Noah.
Here.
Present. Good. And Francine, you're probably still hanging in there.
Yep.
There she is. Francine, I don't know why I'm not going to make any gender-based comments, but we can't hear you quite as well as the gentleman, so I'm going to ask you to feel free to be a little bit louder. Now I'm looking for questions. I actually had a couple myself. Perhaps that's a bit selfish, but I think I'll ask. Now when I think about self-acceptance, I think also, of course, a lot about Psych Central's audience. Many, if not all of us, are dealing with mental health issues of one variety or another, which of course means we're dealing with stigma, and we're dealing with, you know, one of the most burning questions is, do we tell our employers, for example, about our mental health conditions? So my question is sort of a two-parter. Does self-acceptance become radical when, say, for myself, I told my employer that I do have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Is that a part of it? Is that where we go eventually? And if so, I'm looking at a societal viewpoint. Does this mean that eventually our society will evolve and we will collectively be dropping masks and creating, I think, Noah, you're the one who mentioned authenticity. I'm very excited about that whole potential. Does anyone want to speak to that point?
I can speak to it, Zoe. This is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in favor of moving toward greater openness where there's not a stigma attached to things. And at the same time, if you look at self-acceptance, I see that as a separate issue from the issue of disclosure or privacy. And I think it's perfectly okay. I think it's entirely possible to accept yourself and be at peace, and at the same time choose not to reveal things to people that are inappropriate to reveal. Now, where do you draw that line? I can't say, because that's based on the context. It's based on your relationship with your employer. It's based on who you're with. And people draw the lines in so many different ways. You have people who won't share much with anybody, and you have the stranger on the bus that will tell you their life story. So you can draw the line anywhere you want, but I would be hesitant to suggest that self-acceptance is directly related to your willingness to share whatever's going on with you. I think the issue of personal privacy needs to be considered, and again, people can draw that line wherever they want.
Excellent, Mike. I'm just going to jump in here rather assertively and say we've got a bunch of questions coming in, so I'd like to get to some of those before our time runs out. Thank you so much for that. Our first question is, where can I get more information on EMDR? And I think we will have links at the YouTube channel. There will be links directly accessible from there. I'd like to add, Francine, is EMDR, is that modality available in Canada?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's
Great.
actually yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we've got so many questions. I hope you don't mind if I go into a few more. We've got one, and this is for nobody in particular, is it possible to undo trauma in childhood?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Great question.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how young you were when it occurred. The bottom line is that it's stored in memory, and those unprocessed memories can be accessed and therefore processed. So it doesn't matter how long something has been there, it can change.
Okay. And how many sessions of EMDR does it typically take to process negative emotions?
Well, it depends upon how many traumas have occurred. Again, if it's a single trauma, PTSD from a single trauma, for instance, can be processed within 3 sessions. For combat veterans, where there's multiple traumas.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing because there's some shuffling of papers or something going on. Sorry.
For instance, with combat veterans, 12 sessions have eliminated PTSD because there's more memories involved. And if you have a pervasive negative experiences in childhood, then it's going to take more time. But the good thing about it is you don't have to process each and every memory. You can, because since they're interconnected, you identify clusters of memories. So times I was humiliated in school, times my parents pushed me away, times, whatever they might be. And so processing one memory of these different clusters can affect all of the associated memories. So again, it becomes, it's efficient, but it depends upon what the clinical presentation is.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple more questions, and I'm aware we just have a couple of minutes left. So I love this one. For Francine, is there a physiological understanding of the concept of the unprocessed memory? And maybe before you answer, I'll ask you to be brief, and perhaps we can include a link to more information on our Psych Central YouTube channel with that one. So is there a physiological understanding of the concept of the unprocessed memory?
Yes, actually, one of the researchers, Robert Stickold, has talked about how EMDR links into the same processes that occur during rapid eye movement sleep. And during that time, rapid eye movement sleep takes what's called an episodic memory that has the negative emotions, etc., and puts the appropriate linkages in, so it ends up in what we call semantic memory. You understand it, you know it happens, the meaning is there, but you no longer have that negative impact. And that's what we're looking at as the basis of the unprocessed memory. These are episodic memories that are inappropriately stored, and they simply haven't changed. And again, so that's the physiological basis that we're looking at. And in that research list that's available in the resources, you can take a look at at that list, and it has the specific citation for it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I mean, I think it's sort of obvious that collectively we have so much wisdom and experience on the line here. It's a shame we might have to do a follow-up. So we have one more question. And Francine, you may very well have answered this already, but I'll read it. It's, how does the EMDR technique make the link between past experiences and current reactions more able to get processed adequately? Why does just cognitively knowing about it not work? And I would invite anyone to jump in here at the last part.
Right. Well, they're different systems. Cognitive awareness simply isn't sufficient to do it. The techniques that are available in the book, you link into the memory system itself and you access the memory in a certain way that allows the processing to take place. The processing itself is what forges those neurophysiological linkages that lays it to rest. Simply knowing about it, where it came from, can certainly help. Again, the techniques that will allow you to identify what childhood memory is really at the basis of the guilt or the shame or the insecurity. Being aware of it can certainly help, but ultimately what you want to do is continue to use the techniques to shift your reactions to it, and ultimately what you want to do is have that full processing take place. So if you look at these different video sessions of EMDR therapy, you see that the emotions change spontaneously, the insights change spontaneously, the self-love emerges, the self-awareness emerges, because that's what the brain is geared to do, except again, if the disturbance is too high, it's become overwhelmed and locked up.
Thank you so much. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave people wanting more. But before we do wrap up, thank you, Francine. I would like to ask first Mike and then Noah and you, Francine. Mike, just to wrap up, is there, in regard to tonight's topic, is there one resource that you, and we will put these up on the Psych Central YouTube channel, is there one resource now that you would like to recommend that folks go to follow up on this particular topic?
Yes, thank you. The website is inlpcenter.org. If you just go to the homepage at inlpcenter.org, there's a free video there that you can watch. It's about 20 minutes long, and it is an introduction to self-sabotage that goes into much greater depth. You have to put your email address in, and it will redirect you instantly to that video.
Fantastic. And again, we will have that URL at the end of the webinar, and I'm having trouble hearing again with some shuffling, so I might mute you guys. Okay, great. And Noah, same question to you. Is there one resource that you'd like to mention now before we wrap up so that folks can follow up on this particular topic?
Yeah, well, there's no one resource. There are so many people that have contributed to self-compassion and self-acceptance. So the link that I had at the end of my PowerPoint, which is goodtherapy.org/sch.html, that will take you to a PDF handout that we uploaded that has links to many innovators, short articles, books, websites, research, so people can explore self-compassion some more.
Oh, fabulous. Handouts. I love it. All right. Well, heavens, I cannot believe how quickly our time went tonight. It was just a fantastic webinar. I absolutely will be one person who will be listening to it again more closely, pausing at different slides, really thinking about what I'm hearing. And I would very, very much like to thank the participants, everyone who signed up and attended tonight at our live session. And again, psychcentral.com. Go to the YouTube channel to see this again. There are other webinars there that you can look at that we have done in the past. And so for this evening, I'd like to thank everyone who attended live and those who will be listening afterwards. I'd like to encourage you to visit to find out the links for the handouts and other resources that tonight's guests have so graciously provided. And finally, I'd like to thank Psych Central for hosting, and of course, our esteemed presenters, Mike Bondurant, Noah Rubenstein, and Francine Shapiro, for the Heart of Self-Acceptance. On behalf of PsychCentral.com and me, Zoe Kessler, good night, everyone, and thank you.